Welcome, welcome.
Hello again, and your host, as always, Aspire.
And Marcel, allegedly.
Welcome to Allegedly.
Aspire, lately you spoke in one episode of ours about that you don't really like the concept of the war between Russia and Ukraine for one particular reason that there are mostly white people against white people killing each other. And who is in favor of it? And do we know in the history of humanity in the last few centuries, do we know the situations where, let me say, one nation is on the top of some war, is pulling the strings, and we, as a white people, are killing each other based on some provoked hatred between us?
Right. It's just like what's happening here in Poland. What has been happening throughout history, and this kind of provocation, this poking with a stick, if you will, where nowadays in Poland, there's a lot of and I predicted this as soon as it was happening and taking place with the Ukrainian refugees. There's a lot of propaganda against Ukrainians and bringing up, opening old wounds, and when you consider some topics like Banderas, this is such a minority group. And it's not like, oh, well, this is just it's not all Ukrainians type of statement. But the fact of the matter is like when you compare groups like this to something like, um, Islamists going to the UK, or some situation like that, where it's supposedly under similar pretenses, where these people are escaping war. You have the scientists, the doctors, the engineers, the people who have brought a lot to Poland. Not saying that it needed it, but it certainly helped, particularly since we Poland needed this. I'm just saying this from the perspective of an outsider. I was about to say we, but since I haven't had Polish family here in almost a century, it would be maybe better to say that. But sorry, I'm getting a little bit off track here on this tangent. But yeah, we have a tradition of we don't have a tradition. The Jews have a tradition of manipulating us to really hate. Each other, and to keep that fire stoked. I mean, an easier example is the Germans. I mean, how many? I wonder if Poland has the most anti-German books ever produced than any other country. I mean, like when I came here in 2016, and I can't remember if it was that year, 2017, how I was seeing, posters from nationalist groups, MVU, which I somewhat respect, um, putting up these posters. Well, I can't remember if it was maybe it was National Radical Camp, but they were putting up posters around Warsaw, still bringing up, tearing open old wounds, hating on Germans for these crimes, which certainly did take place, and certainly was a tragedy, and was carried out by terrible people. But I don't want to focus too much on that. We're not going to focus too much on that. But just to bring up an example, and as we become more marginalized in society, the benefit, however, is just like we're kind of in many places, in many countries, there's the outcry for unity, and the only thing is that they can keep stoking this kind of fire of hatred amongst essentially brothers. Um, so why don't you add more to that?
Okay, so as I'm following the history, for example, previously we had events in the 30s years of the last century of Holodomor in Ukraine, when mostly Bolsheviks were were hungering up and starving up the people in Ukraine, and they have let die around 15 million people. And if you have a look at the very top management of Bolsheviks and people who were managing the Holodomor, this whole process of 2 years of hungering the innocent people, you will see that people on the top are not coming. They don't have Slavic or white origin. The same thing was happening 30 years earlier in Russia during the Russian October Revolution, when the Tsar was taken down, was killed, and also Bolsheviks have killed so many white Slavic people. And when you have a closer look at the management of the very top deciding people there, they do not have Slavic origin, Slavic roots. Recently in Ukraine, people throwing innocent soldiers into slaughterhouse on the war. On the top of Ukraine, we also have a president who does not have Ukrainian origin. I'm coming here to conclusion that from my point of view, the history here repeats itself, and we Slavic people are being manipulated against each other, and mm, when we have also a closer look, almost everywhere here in Europe is being white people being directed onto white people, and constant hate against each other. Do you aspire? Do you think that okay, in our part of Europe, we see that into slaughterhouse are being thrown just white people, and on the top are it's like different nation. But what I'm observing in the last 20 years in the Western Europe, that there is also white genocide by flooding these countries with people from different cultures, different ethnic groups who are killing this white culture, and because of that also are the birth rates among white people are plummeting. What do you think?
Yeah, well, let me rewind a little bit with much of the statements that you made is and by the way, starving. When you mentioned hungering, starving. Uh, but to rewind a little bit and to go back, I mean, almost around 10 million Ukrainian lives perished during Holodomor, and indeed before that in Russia, which is something that a lot of Slavic people, not just the Poles, tend to ignore, was just how many ethnic Russians were genocided by the Bolsheviks when they took power. Around 30 million is the number, approximately, and that's in I don't know how many countries in Eastern Europe would disappear with those kind of losses. And nowadays we're not seeing losses of millions or hundreds of thousands. I mean, it's still devastating. Well, certainly Ukraine is being devastated by this effect, and the greater effect of loss of life is in the loss of births because of this, the destabilization, and the fact that there isn't the same benefits given to them as refugees. But sorry, I of course am trailing off here. So going back into that, we had indeed Holodomor and the Bolshevik Revolution organized by outside ethnic groups. We had, of course, a bit of Georgians and I can't remember. I think some Algerian. No, not Algerians.
Well, in the top management of Bolsheviks, if you have a closer look, there were no ethnic Russian people. They were like Trotsky, who was from Poland. They were Armenian, Georgians, many Jews, of course, but they were.
Yeah, no, I was just trying to get these other parties out of the way. You can list the other ethnic groups, but the majority of the Bolshevik government, and this is confirmed through Allied reports long before World War II, and of course during the course of the Bolshevik Revolution was just like, wow, there's a total Jewish domination, a Jewish power, not struggle, but power move to take over this continent and actually, or continent,
Do you
country.
know how Karl Marx, with the, let me say, Middle Eastern origin, how did he want to conquer the world, and how the Lenin, because of it, wanted to conquer the world? Do you know?
Why don't you tell us?
So it was communism. So Bolsheviks, first of all, they have decided that all of the wealthy white Slavic people in Russia should be either beheaded or expropriated. So their real estate was taken away, and state took over the all of their properties. So their way to control the people was to spread the communism everywhere in the world, but mostly back then in Russia. So people, all of the, let me say, Slavic citizens, are on equal poor level. They will be easily manipulated, and they will be easily also controlled by the government. And on the top will be this. Will be these different ethnicities who will be pulling the strings, and who will be keeping them under the shoe. So
Mostly Jews, of course.
mostly Jews. But we Poles, Ukrainians, we have inherited communism after Second World War, and we were also slaves for the next 50 years because of that. And Ukraine was previously also the Holodomor was also was managed the same way, that private owners of the farms, they were not able to produce food for the people, and basically government has
Well,
decided.
and it was stolen from them.
Yeah, it
Whatever
was
they
stolen.
had, down to the last grain. I mean, they were attempting to hide, food in the floorboards and such as this. And to make example of those who did, when they were caught hiding food, they were often executed in front of their families and worse. Yeah.
Do you know that there was a death punishment after Second World War in Poland in 50s if somebody was selling food privately? So imagine that you had like four pigs and you were selling their food. There was a corporal or death punishment in Poland for doing that.
Wow, yeah, I didn't know about that. I did know that in Russia, after the Bolsheviks took over, there was the convenient anti-Semitism law that if you were anti-Semitic and Bolshevism, if you thought you would just go to prison, it's not just prison, you die. You get killed for anti-Semitism in Bolshevik Russia, which is kind of where we're heading at. But now, I mean, it would be too much on the nose to tolerate something like that. But back in those days, they could easily get away with that. And the other thing was just like, okay, that was talking about the past. You kind of also brought it to the modern times, and talking about exterminating Ukrainians is like the multiculturalism is what is the plan for Ukraine after the war ends is to import a new labor force. And where is that labor going to come from? Whereas it's going to come from all these lovely places in the Middle East and Africa, which is another thing I also wanted to mention. When you talked about this kind of white on white conflict, is how much propaganda there is that one side or the other, and this is often shared within right-wing circles, that one side or the other is not white enough. That they talk about, okay, well, Russians, they have black troops, and it's the same thing with Ukrainians. They'll go, oh, look at this, Ukrainians, they have black troops. And it's always these very small, like if there are black troops in the Russian military, in the Ukrainian military. I mean, this is confirmed, as well as probably some other exotic groups as well. I mean, Ukraine has a lot of volunteer forces from all the way in South America and other places, and Russia as well has many auxiliary forces from Africa and things and places like that, who are very willing and gung ho. But the bottom line is just like these people see they're such a small fraction of the actual military that they're using there, and I'm not arguing that it should be this way. It's like if you want to fight this terrible war, this meat grinder of a war, it should be more of them and less of us. But you see, in the there's plenty of drone footage out there, and I have seen so many of these drone videos. I have not seen one drone video where it's detonating over a bunch of black conscripts or something like this. It's always boom, dead white man, boom, another dead white man, and people just ignore this fact. They dismiss it. They oh well, but this is the matter of a fact, and this is just some element, and I to me it's one of those things where probably Jews pushed it and developed this machine that is maintained by, as Stalin put it, the useful idiots who continue to maintain this propaganda machine of denigrating and dehumanizing the other side, rather than hey, what's the real problem here? What's the real problem of the cause when you have Jews on all sides, the Russian government, the Ukrainian government, the American government, the most Jews ever. I always think I'm always amazed, like when Trump first came into presidency, and I was just shocked to learn. I was like, wow, this is the most Jewish government. This is the most Jewish president, as one notable Jewish investor proudly proclaimed. And then Joe Biden came in, and I was like, wow, his government's even more Jewish. And then Trump comes back, and actually I haven't even bothered to check. I mean, there's so many Jews in the American government right now. We have our top general of the military. He's Jewish. And it's like he's never he's just one of these people who collects awards, and has never really done anything for the service. I'm sorry, I can't remember his name, but it's quite easy to find. You can look up his military record, and I'm sure it's like he's been to some deployments, but and he doesn't have the best interests, of course, of the American soldier in mind. But what's some things that I missed here?
I just wanted to mention two books that I recently came across. It was a book of the Austrian painter called My. In English it would be My Battle. My Struggle. My Struggle. My.
We have to say that I've been waiting to have my copy of this book returned to me because. I didn't mean to interrupt. Please continue, and then
recently I came across two books. So the first one was My Struggle. Second of all was White Army. It was a book about resistant army.
The author of White Army.
It was one general of Russian army who stood against the Bolsheviks.
So it was the White Russians. Just to clarify, there was for those who might be unfamiliar with the time of the Bolshevik Revolution, there was the Red Army and the White Army. And the White Army was the pro-Tsar force. Oh, and which, after you finish your take on this, I want to comment about Q, because actually Q has a lot in relation to what happened to the White Army in Russia during this time. So, sorry, please continue.
But my conclusion from both books were that both authors of these books, so Austrian painter and the general of Russian White Army, they were throwing the same accusation towards one ethnic group who was destabilizing their countries at this time. So Germany in the 20s and 30s, and Russia, so Soviet Union, at the beginning of 20th century. So it was the generation of the culture. It was expropriation of people, so making people more poor and poor, spreading communism, taking over the banks and making people poorer by giving either scamming them or giving them loans with high interest. So basically, both of these authors were accusing this one ethnic group next to Middle East that they were destroying the white original society, and they were both fighting against it. So I'm just giving you a food for thought, especially in terms of white army who was struggling against the Bolsheviks, the Red Army, for around 10 years. Finally, they have lost, but all of they wanted was to bring Russia at this time into some certain order. When there was a hierarchy, so there was a Tsar, there was a king, there was, and they were like people having some original Russian values, and the Austrian painter was fighting for the same thing, but as it turned in the history, not to mention.
Yeah. Well, we'll get to talk about that. We'll get to mention. Oops. Technical difficulties. We'll get to talk about all that in another episode. I hope. But yeah, that's another thing that really gets used as another one of these prods to continue to propagandize hatred against one another is Russia. Even before the Bolshevik Revolution, Russia was this evil empire. But I mean, this was during the empire days, the age of empires, if you will, and nothing that Russia was doing under the Tsarist Empire was anything different than any other empire at the time, especially like could easily compare it to the British Empire, which arguably may have been doing worse things. And that also kind of ties into World War II, which we'll get into another on another episode. But so that one of the things I wanted to mention, which the White Army suffered, was a very intelligent propaganda campaign by the Red Army heads, by the I can't. There were specific people in charge of running this campaign of deceit to mislead not only the Russian people but the Russian military, because of course communication methods weren't as sophisticated as they are today. And it's hard to say really if people were easier to mislead then than they are now, even despite how well connected we are with the internet and things like that, media. But anyway, they had something called Operation Hope during this revolution, and basically this operation was meant to deceive the Tsarist supporters, including not only the public but the military officers, in a way to say like, oh, the White Army is winning. The White Army is winning, and they were using this tactic to isolate nobility and officers into inaction, and the general public into inaction, to say like everything's going to be fine, the good guys are winning. And then in fact they were again using this method to round up and isolate those who were believing this and not taking any action, and not this was a very effective method of dividing the White Army and keeping them from collectivizing and succeeding on many fronts. Would the White Army have succeeded regardless of this operation? Who's to say? And sorry, I don't think it was called Operation Hope. I will put it in the description. I'll look it up after the show so you can see it for yourself. But something very similar to what we see today in the United States was the QAnon phenomena, with essentially delivering the same message. Everything is just fine. White hats are in control. And you don't have to do anything. And they put this on their channels. Just sit back and enjoy the show. Just listen to Trump, 5D chess. And they would often just tell their audience members, just sit back and enjoy the show, eat some popcorn. Boom! What's Trump going to do next? It just continues. It's just a rehash of this kind of continued operation of propaganda to in this case, it's not so much to isolate the nobility or the military officers anymore, because we don't have that in the United States these days. But instead to pacify the masses, which was very effective in doing in Russia during this time of the Bolshevik Revolution. So I just wanted to add that bit. It's very fascinating. So again, I will put that in the description, and I hope you get to look at it. Anything else?
Not really, but really these last two books, White Army and My Struggle, have fascinated me. Not maybe by the final effect of these books, but I would be really glad if we could discuss them in details, because both have led to some revolutionary events in the history of the world.
Yeah, and thanks as always for tuning in. Like and subscribe, and we'll catch you on the next show, allegedly.